enabled audience to join. Chanchal?
Done, sir.
Give an indication. Done. Okay, fine. Good evening, everybody. IEA members and others who have joined this webinar PDM. This is the PDM for the month of June 2020. The topic which is going to be discussed in today's webinar PDM will be fraud risks in the new normal. The speaker will be Mr. Arun Balaji, Associate Partner, Ernst & Young, Chennai. Initially, I would like to introduce our Vice President of the Madras chapter, who will talk about IAA India, IAA Global, etc., etc. for a few minutes. He is Vice President of the Madras chapter. He is the Head of Internal Audit and Chief Risk Officer of Equitas Bank Limited. And before joining Equitas, he was Chief Internal Auditor for Lakshmi Vilas Bank. Now currently with Equitas Bank. Over to Mr. Prabhu for giving a lecture on IAA. Thank you. Over to Prabhu.
Thank you, Vidyadharan.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, friends. I'll give a brief overview of IAA and also on the today's webinar topic. The Institute of Internal Auditors was formed in 1941. Am I audible? Yeah. It was formed in 1941 in Florida, USA for promoting the profession of internal audit, devoted to development of and growth of IA profession. IA has presence in more than 170 countries worldwide. The mission of the institute is to provide dynamic leadership for the global profession of internal auditing. With this mission, to achieve this mission, IIA conducts various activities, mainly providing comprehensive professional educational development opportunities, developing standards, professional practice guidance documents, carrying out various research activities, then conducting certification programs. You are all aware, CIA is a highly recognized flagship certification program of IIA, bringing together internal auditors from various countries to share information and their experience for the benefit of all. IIA is offering flagship certification program called CIA, Certified Internal Auditor, throughout the world, including in India. In addition to CIA, IIA conducts other certification programs also, like certification on risk management, certification on audit in financial services, which are also quite useful for the audit and other fraternity. IIA Global also publishes a bi-monthly journal called the Internal Auditor, which contains very useful and practical-oriented articles on various subjects of interest to internal audit community throughout the world. Now, coming to India, in India, IIA, we have 6 chapters and 4 clubs. Chapters are Chennai, Mumbai, New Delhi, Kolkata, Bengaluru, and Hyderabad. Then we have audit clubs, smaller versions of the chapters at Pune, Vadodara, Bhilai, and Kochi. And there is an All India body, Institute of Internal Auditors, IIA India, supervising and controlling these chapters and clubs. And these chapters and clubs also conduct various training programs on useful topics to the members. IIA also publishes a quarterly journal called Internal Audit Quarterly. It has a publication committee which focuses on publishing useful books for the internal audit fraternity also. If you look at a few recent publications of the IIA, One is role of internal audit in internal financial controls reporting and fraud detection using data analytics. And IIA conducts various webinars on contemporary subjects for members and others in internal audit field and risk management field. Now coming to Madras chapter. Madras chapter was formed in 1977 and is one of the very active chapters in the country. We have dynamic leadership here conducting various programs, and annual conferences of IIA Madras is quite unique in the way there are 3 parallel tracks running, tech sessions for 2 days. It draws large number of internal audit, risk management and other professionals, mostly from South India and across the country also. In addition to that, we conduct various training programs and webinars in collaboration with other bodies like ISACA, MMA, ICWA, Indian Audit and Accounts Department, ACCA, etc. Every year in the month of May, it is celebrated as the International Internal Audit Awareness Month. And this program, this webinar is a part of this celebrations being conducted by Madras chapter. And the members, the membership has various benefits. Becoming a member of IIA brings various benefits. Mainly, you will be the member of a global community, IIA Global. You will have access to research and educational products published by the Internal Audit Foundation, exploring current issues, emerging trends, and future needs, with many contemporary and also complementary downloads and exclusive members-only pricing on many of the items in the bookstores also. So it brings a lot of benefits for you to gain the knowledge on these areas. Then there is opportunity for job opportunities also, like there is a internal audit job opportunity career portal is available. CAA is a sought after certification across the world in the various the IIA certification, CAA certification holders get opportunity to work in various areas like operations, risk management, internal audit, IS audit, etc. So it is a great profession. This is a good opportunities available to work in various areas. Now, coming to today's topic, it is fraud risk in the new normal. I will just take 2-3 minutes to give a brief on this. Then Mr. Arun Balaji will take over. Now, as you all see, the world is in a lockdown state and slowly grappling to open up the economy. In this situation, see, remote work from home and limited resources availability, social distancing, all these have become new norms. Normally, focus of the organizations now will be starting the operations, continuing the business, so that becomes and it has to be handled with a limited resource available. In the process, what happens? The functions like risk management, internal audits, also there is more possibility and opportunity. So, in line with changes in the business model and operational procedure, now what is required is risk management, compliance, and audit functions. That is the second and third line of defense have to embrace digital and technology to address the new needs of controls. It is now very clear, even after virus is gone, we are not going back to our earlier way of doing business. That is what is called new normal. It is to be new normal wherein digital will prevail. So naturally, fraud prevention, we will need to have different methodologies, new methodologies to address the new kind of frauds happening in this technology era. So when you look at that, probably there are two things becomes very, very vital. First is the clearly what is articulated by the top management, tone at the top. So there should be clear indication that there will be zero tolerance towards frauds. Any kind of fraudulent activity will not be tolerated. Second, internal audit function as a third line of defense can play a very vital role because it is the only internal audit function which has a clear understanding of all the functions in the organization as a third line of defense. So we need to guide the business. We need to tighten our audit processes. We should simultaneously work with the business and operations instead of starting the audits post implementation and all that. Even in our organization now, we closely work with the IT function, with the operations functions to ensure that we provide the expertise and guidance then and there in implementation of various activities. So new normal is going to be there. What needs to be done to address the fraud element and how to prevent, detect, and take care of this fraud risk management. Mr. Arun Balaji, Associate Partner of EY, he has a lot of experience and expertise on this area. He will be guiding us and taking us through this webinar. So I request all of you to be active and actively participate, ask the questions, get the clarifications, and ensure maximum you will get the maximum benefit. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great time. And over to Arun Balaji.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for setting the context very well. And once again, I thank IAA for this opportunity. A very apt discussion in the right time. I'm just going to present my screen so that you all can see my screen.
We can see your screen, sir.
Okay, thank you. So as Mr. Satyananda Prabhu set the context, what I want to give a couple of more thoughts before I dive into these slides is one, problem is not because of COVID, it is actually how we deal the outcome of that. So most of the problem is because we try to find a solution for something which we cannot find. Actually, we should look for what should be the alternate and mitigating things because of outcome of COVID. The moment the focus shifts there, we will be focusing on the right things. So before I kind of jump into what you should look for, I think this is an important slide where we need to spend some time. So whatever we are currently going through, there is some precedence in some form. You can compare the 2008 recession, which happened. So it's a very good study done by ACFE. So I want to spend some time here so that there's a good context which is set. So post 2008 recession, a lot of things changed. But the difference between 2008 and 2020 is two things. In 2008, it was only an economic distress. In 2020, it is economic and physical distress. So that is where the angles and dimensions changes. But there is some level of precedence available in terms of what can happen. So if you see the statistics, during 2008 post-recession, almost for a year, the average frauds were about 2,504 reported from 125 countries, spanning to close to about $4 billion of fraud. And average was about 1.5 million. And 86% of this fraud was all an asset misappropriation. And 10% was financial fraud. So that's about 96% of the fraud. And Next most important aspect was corruption, because there will be a scheme which people will want to cut fast, move fast. So corruption is another angle which will come in. So financial misstatement and misappropriation will give lead way to some areas of corruption where money is required to pay a bribe or win a contract. So it's very important to note that even during the economic distress time, where there were all physical controls in place, the number of frauds recorded were 2,504 of significant value. Think of a situation now where there is an economic distress as well as there is a physical distress because there is a supply chain bottleneck and physically people are not being available. So we will touch upon that as we go along. These are some important statistics to keep in mind. The second part of the information to keep in mind is on the right side. If you see 8 and 15 and 22, that's roughly 45% of the frauds of the financial statement is because of the tone at the top, where people will want to do a fraud because they want to show better numbers or they want to move faster, borrow, so whatever is the need. But the tone at the top is the important problem for this 45% of the frauds which are happening. So as internal auditors, we should not just look at transactions, but very importantly also look at tone at the top and rush things happening in terms of disclosures, in terms of returns filed, in terms of new projects, closure of new projects, opening of new projects. So all these areas will happen at a very fast pace and in a manner in which it is not very comfortable. So all of these areas are concern areas. Continuing some of these statistics, the next page. Now you may ask, okay, there is some precedence and we are having added problem of physical distress. So what is the learning from the last time? If you see on the left side, whistleblower complaints increased by 19% when there was training. So making people aware that what fraud is, what the company should not do at this point of time increases the opportunity for the whistleblowing channel to get information if a fraud is happening. So normally fraud gets reported at 37%. When there is training, it is 56%. And people did this awareness training after the economic distress quite a bit across the world, because of which many frauds got reported. So it is time as internal auditors, you do a campaign awareness or get external people or the top management to do some sessions, explain the people what is a fraud, what is not acceptable, and what is violation of code of conduct and policy. It's very important because there will be a lot of pressure from business to do. They will say for business, we have to do this. It's very important to explain to people. So it is important.
Sorry for interruption, Mr. Arun Balaji. Due to some miscommunication, I was unable to talk because of muted by organizer. So I could not introduce formally the speaker. I shall do it now. Sorry for the interruption. Mr. Arun Balaji is an associate partner with Forensics with Ernst & Young. He joined EY in the year 2004. Now based out of Chennai. Overall, he has 20 years of experience. He leads the forensics practice for Chennai and supports forensics practice on technology, automotive nationally. He has extensive experience in governance, risk, fraud investigation, anti-corruption reviews. He has worked on client engagements in India, Kuwait, Egypt, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and the UK. He has performed multiple governance reviews in various sectors in the areas of purchase, manufacturing, supply chain, sales, and other areas. He has carried out forensic due diligence and anti-corruption reviews. He has carried out fraud risk assessment investigations for various functions including sales, supply chain, manufacturing, facilities, accounts payable. He has performed several proactive anti-bribery, anti-corruption reviews in sectors like pharma, consumer, technology, and manufacturing. He has assisted leading public sector banks in investigating potential diversion of funds. He has supported clients on dispute advisory services to assist the management governance tools models for a large retail consumer companies. He has conducted several training sessions to corporates on investigations, anti-corruption, anti-bribery, fraud awareness, governance, and audit. With this brief introduction, I now request Arun Balaji to continue his lecture presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mr. Gautam. Continuing, so it is important that we do a lot of training awareness to the people because business will put a lot of pressure. So frauds will happen. If people are not aware what it is, then people will not be able to give the tips or the whistleblow or communication about the fraud. Now, the important part of this fraud reporting is on the right side. Typically, companies will have emails or phone numbers or both. But having both is very, very important because most of the time people prefer to speak to give about a fraud than just writing an email because people may not be very comfortable in writing. So it's important that when we have a mechanism for fraud reporting, you should have a number to call and email reference, and also today people are having chat bots to report fraud. 66% of whistleblowers use phone numbers or email. It's important to have both the communication. Until 10 years ago, it was only email, but over the last few years, phone calls have become very, very prominent, where people are able to express themselves when they call and make a complaint. Now, the importance, very, very important point is on the right side. If you see, frauds happen in 1/3 of the scenario when there is lack of internal control. So what that means is that in 2/3 of case, when the internal control is working, still the fraud is happening. So normally people will focus on the 1/3, which is because of lack of control, fraud is happening. Because of lack of control, fraud is happening. Yes, it is happening, but that is only 1/3 of the frauds. 2/3 of the fraud is happening when the internal controls are in place because of collusion and tone at the top of issues. So it's very important to also look at when there are compensating controls, when there are adequate internal controls, what is the detecting mechanism we should have on the data points, on the transactions, on the decision making, so that you are able to detect a fraud. It's very important not to close our eyes where controls are working, because 2/3 of the frauds are happening where all the controls typically work. This is the statistics from the research which happened post-recession by ACFE over the last few years. Moving on to the next slide. So now, what is happening between 2008 and 2020? Whatever you're seeing below in the key fraud risk, asset misappropriation, employee frauds, third-party risks, and corruption happened in 2008 also, is happening in 2020 also. But what is the new which is happening in 2020 is the top 3. Data theft, for either for jobs or selling it for any profitable venture, cyber threat, cyber attacks, ransomware, counterfeiting, for selling other branded products as if it is their own but doing a counterfeiting. In the last 4 months, 5 months from the time COVID has come, these three have taken over the world phenomenally. Many controls were found wanting because companies were not prepared for potential data theft or ransomware attack. It's not that ransomware attack or malware attack or phishing attack has not happened in the past, but now it is happening at a large scale and in very, very sophisticated manner, for which many companies were not ready. Counterfeiting. Today, supply is a problem. Materials are not able to move. So many people are seeing an opportunity and they're counterfeiting big brands so that they are able to supply in places where there is shortfall of stock. So consumer good companies, pharma companies are very, very active in the market and deploying people to stop counterfeiting. The third sector which is active is auto components. Because of supply chain issues, materials are not moving. So local fraudulent manufacturers are taking advantage of this. And there are various segments where this counterfeiting operations happen. Gujarat is a place, north of India, Faridabad is a place, Pune, some parts of Tamil Nadu, some parts of Hyderabad. There are segments of places where counterfeiting manufacturing happens and then gets applied to the area. So these three are key fraud risks, which has come to play over and above what happened in 2008. So in the next few slides, we will see a combination of what happened in 2008, which is happening now, and talk through some of those risks, and then also talk some of the newer risks which have been happening in the area of data theft, cyber, and counterfeiting. Moving on to technology as an enabler. Before I jump into these 6-7 risks, today what is happening? Customer, vendor, and business associates. Physical touch point is literally not there. Every interface is through technology or digital or an app or phone call, which is where the cyber risk comes in, where cyber security becomes very, very important. Because these three have become very, very important, relevant people, process, and system have not adequately adjusted, modified, or changed. 3 reasons. 1, time was very short. 2nd, there is no precedence for some of the areas. And 3, people thought, what can go wrong? So let me keep running my operations. So all 3 were the reasons where people, systems, and processes were not upgraded to the extent it was required. Also, people thought it may go away in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks. But now people have realized it's going to be there for 6 more months or maybe a year until the vaccine is really found. So now people are gearing up. Now they feel that people, process, system have to really match up to the digital systems and processes which are being put in place for interfacing with customers, vendors, business associates, so that the cyber risk can be managed. So what people have started to do for all vendors, they are doing a third-party diligence by technology monitoring to see that, okay, this particular vendor, can he really supply me material? How is he operating? What is the data points I can monitor about him so that I can be rest assured he's really operating? Employee monitoring, some extent with respect to data protection, email monitoring. Are they not siphoning out of data? Are they sending a lot of data to Gmail? Are they downloading a lot of information not relevant to them? They may not have sent, but are they downloading information which are not relevant for them? So these are some examples. We will see in detail some of these so that you can understand how technology is intertwining in all of these areas and creating the new risks in the new normal. Now let's take third-party risks. What will happen? Primarily, the big area which will start happening is false claims by vendors and customers. You would not have seen much claims till now, but you can be rest assured in matter of time there will be a lot of claims. Some may be genuine and many may be false. Some people would have activated force majeure clause. After activating, would have realized that it's not really helpful. So people will start concatenating stories so that the claims can be supported. So you need to really start building a lot of evidence and review some of those aspects where there could be a claim, which could be a customer, which could be a vendor, reviewing the contracts, reviewing the third party transactions, so that we can protect our company by reviewing in advance so that these false claims can be prevented. Giving an example of a false claim. For example, if there was a supply contract, back-to-back supply contract, where we were supposed to supply in 90 days and we didn't get the material, hence we could not supply. So first of all, were there adequate communication to say that we did not get material in time, hence we were not able to supply. Normally what people will do, people will assume that I have communicated over a phone, it's a general information that there are COVID challenges, so people will understand. But other party will turn tricky because he is also into a financial stress. He will start writing emails and recording to say that the company never informed that there is a delay. So we thought all the material will come on time. Now that it has breached 90 days, we are putting this claim, make it good. Contractually and evidentially, you don't have a document to prove yourself until you have any circumstantial evidences to prevent a claim. So there will be a lot of claims which will come. So be prepared, review those areas like vendors and customers to help your company to say that, okay, are we preventing some of these? Legal team may be already in the game, but they may need a lot of support on reviewing the contract and its financial implication so that you are able to help them prevent some of these claims. Second is low credit worthiness. This is the most important thing. What will happen is most places, suppliers will say, I am not able to supply now. So your manufacturing team and procurement team will identify new vendors to supply. Now, there is a risk whether the new guy will be able to supply or not. How do you really assess? You cannot just do the normal checks, what you do for a background check. You have to look at his credit worthiness. Does he have really the working capital for manufacturing? Is he really defrauding to get an order? Because you will again commit a back-to-back to supply to another vendor. So when you are appointing a new vendor, because an existing vendor is not able to supply, is really an important area to look at the risks, because that's an area a lot of fraud will happen where the customer commitment will go for a toss if you are not able to assess the vendor from assessing whether he is potentially doing a fraud or doing a trick on you in saying that he is able to supply. The next area is non-compliance and social compliance. Many areas we will be more than happy saying that, okay, let me get material so that my factory is running. You may not be really worried whether your sub-vendor, contractor is really compliant. So don't take the eye of compliance, keep a track of that, because tomorrow in principle to principle, you are also responsible for some of the frauds he is doing and non-compliance he is doing. Because if there's an email evidence say that somehow you supply material, doesn't matter how you supply. So those all will go against your evidence because you are promoting him to be non-compliant. So be clear, slower business, steady business is much better than getting in doing a non-compliant business. Third aspect is involving money laundering, because sometimes we will not do a background check about these vendors adequately to see, okay, whether these people have any unethical background. Are these people already been classified as NPA? The sister concern is classified as NPA. Are they in the anti-money laundering list? Are they in the shell company list? It's very important to look into all of this so that you are protecting your company from these potential third-party risks. The next two are easier ones. Are there any bribery, corruption, or litigation you are getting into because of entering into this contract? So feel very important to consider this, because the moment you are found wanting in these areas, the legal and regulatory risks are far high. So rest of the other non-compliance area, bribery, corruption, and litigation, be careful. Others are more commercial, but these three becomes very important from a legal perspective. And Other is looking into potential political connections of these vendors, because sometimes you may enter into a situation where people may say that, okay, give me order in this location. So they may force fit themselves. So just be careful of the political side. Moving on to other frauds, which we discussed on the asset misappropriation. Material may not come. Capital expenditure may have started, but it might have put on hold whether what happened to the material, because physically people may not have been there. Your CCTV may not be working full time because you typically keep it for 15 days, and by this time all overrating things would have happened. So if material is moved, you would not know. So what are the composite controls around that? Are there misrepresentation on the invoices and the documents submitted? Is there a second eye looking at the invoices, or you are following only the normal AP controls? On CSR spends, now also one more notification has come where independent audit has to come. So whatever CSR spends are really CSR spends, or people are just adding a CSR spends and taking the money out. So all these areas are very, very important to look from. Is money really leaking from a fraud perspective? So now coming to so fraud monitoring has to be continuous now. It has to be data driven, email driven. So there's a lot of data available. As internal auditors, you can play lot many role supporting the compliance officer, risk officer, legal team by evolving the patterns. So I just want to give you only in a retail point of sale, you can have 143 trends looked into, 143 trends. I'm just telling you retail point of sale system. That many parameters can be watched. Then look at how many parameters you can watch in each of the functions. You need not do all, start small. Start looking at various potential frauds, what data points needs to be looked into. Start with purchase to pay and O2C, and start figuring out what those scenarios are, and start looking at what are the immediate ones, which data I will look into, how we will monitor. Then critical employees, what data should be monitored? Are they downloading a lot of data? Are they sending to people? Are they accessing data which is not relevant to them? So those are areas we can do an online monitoring. Traditional audit areas will have to undergo a change. Many companies have started including changing the audit areas. Some companies are doing a look back review. They are saying that I will look at all transactions happened in 3 months time to see if something is abnormal. So you need to start looking at what is essential and necessary for the current scenario. So don't go by traditional areas, traditional methods. Those areas will have to be covered, but you need to also optimize what is the area to be covered. So this is just an example of what a typical procure to pay a data monitoring for fraud could happen. What can be done in vendor management? What can be done at requisition stage? What can be done at purchase order stage, invoicing and payment? I'm not getting into these details. I'll definitely be sharing this deck, and I'm sure you could go through some of those. These are not exhaustive. I've just put sub-process level what you should look into. Like this, you should develop for each of the areas what you can look into, and start developing a framework. Take help from, you have to build a small team within the internal audit team or a cross-functional team which can look into these scenarios and start building and monitoring. Regular monitoring will be the need of the hour. Your one-time audit, periodic audit is important, but online regular monitoring is very, very important. Moving on from the people side. So it's very important now in terms of how we onboard people, because people are desperate for jobs. Unemployment level is increasing at a new level. So people are compromising integrity to take up jobs. So please do a background check of people and keep a watch on the people, what they bring in. Many times people are taken inside because they're able to come with intent. So be clear on your controls, processes, what is that are being offered, promised by the employee as well as the people interviewing. So keep a background of these people. Are these people resigned employees, terminated employees? Are they coming out because They have been asked to leave because of a fraud and not because of performance. So keep a complete watch on the people who are joining, because all these people could have, I'm not saying demeaning all the people, but it's very, very important to keep a tab on what kind of people are joining, because there are chances that we may be onboarding a bad apple. So keep an additional watch on the people who are onboarded. On top of that, you need to monitor emails, which is also part of people, but I'm merging that for interest of time and presentation in the technology side. You have to look at two sides from a email and data monitoring perspective. On the right side, it's on the email. Three things you have to look at. There are a lot of careless employees who don't change password, share information carelessly on Gmail, who carelessly send information to people not applicable. So you have to start educating them. Second is compromised employees. What is compromised employee? People who rationalize wrongdoing. So whenever you are in an internal audit discussion, or when you start hearing conversations where people believe that okay, wrongdoing is okay because business requires it, those are all people typically compromised employees who can do, when they can do something wrong for the process or an order, they can do wrong even to put the company at risk. Those we typically qualify them as compromised employee. Third category is employee who's leaving because he can take anything. Actually, people do a mistake of looking at what he does after he leaves. Actually, after the date of resignation, actually, he should look 6 months before he resigns, resignation date, because the date of resignation is only a cutoff point of him resigning. He has been thinking about this for a few months before he landed up in a job. So he should start looking out of his activity 6 months or 3 months before, depending upon his role, so that you are monitoring what he downloaded, what he transferred, what he sent to his personal email address, what did he copy, how many USB drive he used, did he use a lot of hard drive data, so did he delete data. So all of this becomes very, very important in monitoring. In today's world, this is very important from an employee perspective to monitor all these from an email perspective and data perspective. On the left side is a little technical. I'm not a technical forensic person, but I can give you a good hang of what these are so that you can ask these questions to your IT people, so that are they adequately covering in audit. Typically, IT risk, IT control audits do happen, but frequency should definitely go up. Preventive review for a malware attack or a virus attack or a ransomware attack should happen, because there are many more attacks that happen. Phishing attacks are happening. So proactive review, IT audit, IT risk audit. So in the overall audit procedure, there has to be higher share allocated for IT risk audits. And there should be specific activity around on the cyber, and the frequency should be definitely improved. Second is unauthorized softwares downloaded. Often people download multiple softwares because they want to do work. So be very, very careful on what softwares, because that is where some of the malwares come. So we need to very be conscious of what kind of softwares are being downloaded, who's using what kind of software, if they are licensed, not licensed. So we have to be very, very careful on this. Third area is remote work from home access. So have our controls improved, because a lot of access is happening from work from home. So our control architecture changed. Has control architecture been reviewed after work from home? Because many controls would have been relaxed or added. Has that been really reviewed? That's an important point to review. All companies, to my knowledge, are doing a review. If any of those reviews are not being done post work from home, that should definitely be carried out to see are there any particular information which is leaking, or are there any potential risks which are going to get exposed for the company perspective. And this is an important slide. From the time an attacker enters the network and he becomes active, it's 120 to 245 days. It's a long time. So In a year, if you're doing an audit, he can still escape. That is where it is very important that we increase the frequency of audit so that if some malware or somebody enters the network, you are able to detect because the person survives for this long. But if you do only once in a year, and if somebody internal is involved, then they know the cycle. So you need to do a lot of surprise work, surprise reviews also in this, because most of the cyber attack, there is some disgruntled employee leaking information. So you need to be very careful in terms of what kind of review is happening. Keep a watch on people who have sacked people, what kind of information they carry. So around those time, increase your controls around that. Review of your IT controls and risk is very, very important. So from here, I move to a completely different topic. It's also important. So I've covered all the significant areas which you should be mindful of in the new normal. But one new dimension, which is going to even more complicate this new normal, is the potential amendment to CARO. I have only one slide, but quite a bit to talk. So I'll take you through that. So though CARO 2020 was applicable for March 20, and it has been postponed to March 21, and guidance note is yet to be out from the institute. But quite a bit requirements are there for internal auditors, statutory auditors, and the company. I'll focus on the requirements on the internal auditors. That's all is going to be my focus. So important change which is coming from 16 to 20 is that internal auditors report has to be considered. Earlier, auditor would have reviewed to say that whether the program is sufficient, program is adequate, and would have commented on the commensurateness of that. Now he has to consider the audit reports. That means apart from the report, they may also ask for a lot of working. They can ask for what is the scope of work. They can ask for basis of the working paper on which the observation is come. Guidance note is yet to come. What will be the pros and cons of that? But as internal auditors, we should be ready for a lot of questioning from the statutory auditor. Given the new normal, where our audit methods have changed, if the CARO is not postponed again once more, then as internal auditors, we have to also be ready for a volley of questions from the statutory auditor. In the given new normal, how did you satisfy yourself that is adequate? What is your working paper for that? How did you satisfy yourself and where it is documented? So how did the audit plan change? How did the audit plan become effective? Because the new year has begun with April. As of now, the new amendment applies. There may be a potential chance that like last year, end of the year, the government may announce a push. Given an assumption, if it does not change, then already the audit planning is done or in process. How are we going to include this in the new normal? That becomes very, very important from a compliance perspective. There are very many changes. I'm not really going to talk about that, but I'm focusing on the statutory audit aspect, which will come on the internal auditors. From a planning perspective, documentation perspective, sharing of reports, sharing of working papers, how ready we are. Or if you have already faced about it, how are we dealing with that? Have we consulted the internal risk compliance officer, legal team? Are we going to share this? However, all listed companies may start facing this in the first quarter, because some auditors may ask, because in the first quarter they may want to look at what is audit plan. Though there is no guidance note, how will statutory auditors approach this? I'm not sure, but there can be a question for the listed companies on how are you going to address this. So we need to be very, very careful about this. So I pause here for any questions because I believe in interactive discussion. I have left a lot of loose ends and open areas where I expect people to come back with questions. So I expect 25 to 30 minutes of question because people may have different queries and questions. I pause here for before my closing comments for questions. I open the floor for questions and hand over back to to the person managing all the questions.
Mr. Chanchal, are there any questions coming with you? You can read out one by one. Chanchal, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir. I'm
please.
just doing that.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you take over.
First question is from Palaksa. In today's scenario, in hospitals, the hospitals charge every patient for a PPE kit, but in reality, they don't change PPE dress before checking every patient. So, should this be looked by management, by the management or the internal auditor?
Sorry, initial part of the question, your voice broke. I could not hear. Can you repeat the question, Chanchal?
Yes, sir. In today's scenario in hospitals, the hospitals charge every patient for a PPE kit, but in reality, they don't change PPE dress before checking every patient. So, should this be looked by the management or the internal audit?
It's a primary responsibility to my. So primarily,
Sir, now
it is primarily it is the responsibility of the management because it's a decision which has to be taken that it has to be changed at a frequency set by the government. From an audit procedure standpoint, whenever you are covering utilization, if that is coming in the consumables review, as an area of consumables review, you need to reconcile between the number of times the people changed vis-a-vis the patients and all of that. But primary responsibility is with the management. That's based on my understanding.
thanks, sir. So, second question is whistleblower system compulsory in corporate company? Is there any legal requirement to have hotline number and email for raising suspect frauds? How to deal in the situation where the company do not have a whistleblower system? In that case, who is look after suspected fraud cases?
Whistleblower mechanism is compulsory for most companies. There is only an exclusion of few, like some Section 8 companies. There's a list in the Companies Act. All the companies should have a whistleblowing mechanism. Whether they have an email or a phone number, it is left to the company, but there has to be a whistleblower mechanism and there has to be a published email address or a phone number or both, which is available for employees, vendors, all of them to report. Some people put it in website, some people include in contracts, some people put it in the company policy, vendor policy. We can choose BDMs for dissemination, but it is a requirement for most corporates, barring very, very few exceptions. It's very, very few. It's available in the Companies Act. Apart from that, all corporates should have a whistleblowing mechanism, which is mandatory.
Thanks. Another question. Mr. Anil Bansal asked, how is fraud investigation and internal audit is related to each other? Many times during the internal audit work found suspected cases of fraud. How to deal with during the assignment of internal audit work? Sometimes we know that suspect of fraud is there, but not able to prove.
Yeah, I have been personally an internal auditor as well as an investigator, so I can tell you from a practical experience on how I differentiate. See, suspicion is the kind of the end point in internal audit perspective. Proving the suspicion is the investigator's role. It is not that an internal auditor cannot prove a suspicion, but from a role perspective, typically internal auditors stop when they find a suspicion. The investigator as a role takes over and completes the investigation by proving or disproving the suspicion. That is how I see practically from a role perspective. But it is not that an internal auditor cannot complete the role. but it is only a expectation, because all internal auditors cannot turn investigators, because the role of internal auditor is to report non-compliance, control weaknesses and suspicion. Because if internal auditors turn to be investigators, then every internal audit will take, because investigation will change the fact, will take a longer duration. So timelines will change, reporting mechanisms will change, confidentiality will have to be maintained. So typically, from my personal experience, internal auditors stop at suspicion stage, which is taken over by an investigator to do a fact-finding exercise to report.
So another question, with work from home environment becoming the new normal, how are organizations geared up in terms of remote access, security and infrastructure?
So I'm a non-technical person, but many companies create a VDI access by which they can control what is getting downloaded from your email box. They keep a tab of specific sites being accessed, what kind of data is downloaded, shared. So there can be a footprint, it's called IT footprint mapping. So they map the person for IT footprint mapping from access, transmission, download, transmission of information, all that is in. But still, can people break it? Yes, that is where then the IT security comes into play, to say that what is the data, what is the pattern that particular user is doing. So there has to be a lot of IT footprint mapping and pattern monitoring to see if any particular user is potentially doing a fraud in the work from home scenario.
Thank you, sir. Another question, what are some of the typical fraud risks that IT and ITES sector would be vulnerable to? How does the IA function need to modify the approach to handle this?
There has to be more work around data theft and cyber. I'm sure ITES companies are doing a lot of those, but to me frequency should increase, a lot of monitoring should increase, a lot of awareness should be spread to the employees. See, it's not that 100% of the employees are fraud. It's only that 10% of the people. For more awareness created, so that there will be more whistleblowing tips may come. So there has to be more awareness sessions done, so that there is more reporting of fraud there. There has to be more work around technology side on data theft, cyber. And lastly, whenever there is a new project initiated, for example, some activity was happening physically and that has been moved to online. So there, second check has to be brought in. For example, I'll give you an example. Earlier, an AP review process would have happened with a physical plus online control. But now a scenario will be there where everything is online, from data delivery to payment. So what extent of that control has changed? For example, it is a back office for a manufacturing facility. If a particular truck has come and gone, and with lack of security systems and CCTVs may not be working in all the places, how do you really additionally check that the same truck is not shown 5 times for material receipt? So some companies are doing geotagging with time and place and with material, so that they can do an additional control for material receipt, which can be additionally verified at the back of the center along with other papers. So like that, they can do different checks, timing of entry exit, timing of some of the photographs by different teams. So matching those, or doing for high value. Then now that when lockdown is open, they have now sent physical people to check whether some of those batch stock is still available. So they are tracking batches when they are recording today, when material is, because normally we may not capture all the batch details when coming, because we may not track, because our industry may not require batch capturing. So we need to look at what are the additional controls we need to initiate and additional controls to be activated from a back office side. A pure play technology company should look at utilization of resources. Today, if people are saying that I'm really spending 8 hours in a project, from a revenue perspective, there will be a lot of disputes which may come from a customer saying that your people are saying they're working for 8 hours, but whether they really work for 8 hours. Was their network, where the simple check is whether people are connected to the network for 8 hours. If people were not even connected to the network, how could they have worked for 8 hours? So simple checks could be done. So you need to start thinking innovatively what areas you can give that comfort factor to the customer or to your management by looking at these processes differently than when you are physically present.
Thanks, sir. We have more questions. So can we take?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm all for it.
What could be the possible fraud risk scenarios in sales and logistics in new normal?
Counterfeiting is one big risk. In good stock, they mix up counterfeiting and they sell along with that. So if one truck is going, so they can mix up counterfeiting stock. That's one risk. Second, there could be theft of material, leakage of for counterfeiting. You need something from the genuine material to copy or even leak. So there will be a lot of leakages may happen from the factory on the RM and consumable side. So keep a watch out of the scrap guy, because scrap guy will be freely moving around. So they will be leaking a lot of supply chain, the consumables and raw material for the counterfeiting guy to operate. The third aspect is reconciliation. Do a lot of focus on how you can control yield, control the actual manufacturing vis-a-vis input to output, whether so much have really come. So you need to, now that the manufacturing is only at 30%, 40%, you can really control all of this. So you have to put in a lot of continuous monitoring mechanism right from the material coming in and going out. I'm sure some of you are in batch processing or continuous processing. You cannot do on daily basis, but I'm sure you can do it on periodic basis. Start tracking these on a daily basis to see what is the output when you can. So that give you a lot of inputs in terms of something is wrong in material receipt or dispatches.
Thanks, sir. Another question. What are the tools available to monitor activities of employees in work from home situation, like unauthorized download, sharing of data with outsiders from personal email, etc.?
I'm not a technical person, but if you talk to the IT person, there are enough off-the-shelf products available from Microsoft or security providers like Symantec and few others. So definitely your IT people will be able to give you examples. I'm just giving the best two I know, but there are enough and more products available which you can put it on your system to track all of this.
Sir, we have more questions, so you have to finish presentation. You have more presentation now?
No, I have only closing comments. My presentation is over. I have only closing comments to make.
Okay, okay. So we can take more questions?
Yeah, sure.
So, another question, in your view, whether the expectation that internal audit should discover all frauds in their audit is correct? Can this expectation be fulfilled by internal auditors?
Internal, to my view and my understanding of the law, internal auditor is not here to find frauds. They are supposed to review the controls, and if there is something suspicious, they can report. But objective of the internal auditor is not to find frauds, is to find whether the controls are working, whether the process is working fine. They are not mandated to find fraud. That's my understanding of the law.
Okay, sir. Next question. What are the possible frauds in GST in new normal?
See, today, again, material movement, supply, whether without moving material are people claiming GST with their material receipts. So all those reconciliations will be an issue. If people may not have dispatched but may claim, both of them may know, and there could be some fraud around non-movement of material. I'm not able to think anything new beyond non-movement of material over and above what was there earlier.
Another question. For companies with limited IA resources, staff, how can they adapt their working to monitor business areas, potential risks likely to arise in current scenario?
There is a concept called guest auditor. So you can form a cross-functional team. A finance person, you can have guest auditors, which is a very evolved practice across large companies. So one function will also do an audit of another function. HR will do an audit of operations. Operations will do an audit. So you can get guest auditors. You can improve your people. You can define the process, define what needs to be done, and you can get guest auditors to do the work from different functions. So you can't get a HR person to do a finance audit. You need to do a correlation of those, but you can get guest auditors who are from different functions to embolden your function and cover more areas.
In absence of IT specialist auditors in a team, how can IT ensure coverage of IT and associated risks?
There are very many boutique firms and firms like us who do the work. So people outsource to some of the boutique firms or firms like us when such reviews needs to be done. There are quite a few boutique firms, n number of firms, and big firms like us also do those when people don't have resources to support those audits.
Next question. As a preventive measure against the spread of COVID-19, biometrics attendance is exempted to all central government employees. Is the same applicable to private companies, company employees also? What is the good option to replace and prevent fraud in that scenario?
It's a great question because it's a gray area. My interpretation, biometric is not allowed for anyone, but it is a gray area. The notification was in good intention. It should be read in that context and not go literally by the word. So many private companies also have disabled biometric from a safety perspective, though the law is gray. So from a safety perspective, it's very, very important that we need to take care of our people. In the absence of that, the biometric, your access card is there, but still there is no replacement to a biometric by any means till now, to my knowledge. The other ways to check is what work they have done. If they have laptop, have they really logged in from the office? You can definitely track through their IP. If, for example, I go to the factory and I have a system I have logged in, so I can check that whether I have logged in there. Second is people have evolved a physical tag system. I learned L&T did this. It's called Tag 8. You can Google, you can find that out. So they gave a tag which is through an RFID system. So that tag is given to the employee. They didn't create this for COVID. I think they did this before, where the employee has to carry that. So that is kind of geotagged whether the employee is in the factory or not. So they did this for when there are, for example, L&T has about 40,000 people working in a locality. So they can't be physically counting all of them all the time. This is hearsay, don't catch me by my neck. But I heard that there is a tag which is developed, and I heard them saying Tag 8, which is, you can Google that. So maybe that will give you, and that is a mechanism. So that's like a carry on with them. So that is linked to also payroll. So if they are there in the factory only for so many hours, then they are eligible for pay. So some logic like that, you can search that. There are quite a few people like that. So the one I heard is tag 8, TAG 8 as a numerical number. Some of these are personal experience. Please don't hold EY responsible for that. I'm sharing all these as my personal experience.
Another question: what is your view on ethical helplines for any large corporate?
So there are outsourced service providers. You need not have a helpline yourself. There are companies who provide this as an outsourced service. There are very many firms which are available. I've heard one, I think, Innovity, quite a few. I can send some names offline to the. So you can empanel them. They can do on your work behalf in receiving complaints on helpline and summarize that and give it to you, because everybody will not be able to create infrastructure themselves. So there are enough outsourced vendors available who does it for larger corporates, forget smaller corporates, who receive those complaints and give it to the corporates.
Sir, we have another question. As an internal auditor, we have changed our approach of audit through review of CCTV of location for physical verification controls, any desk or team viewer for SOD or ERP controls, Google Meet, VPN access for ERP for direct data download.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Can you repeat? I'm really sorry.
As an internal auditor, we have changed our approach of audit through review of CCTV of location for physical verification controls, any desk or team viewer for SOD or ERP controls, Google Meet, VPN access for EPR for direct data download.
These are good starting points. Only suggestion is don't look point in time. Look for a pattern on a continuous basis. Otherwise, these are good areas to start. Don't just do one-time review. Start putting these logs and review to look for a pattern.
What key risk or fraud area would be in mutual fund considering prevailing COVID-19 situation?
You need to review these third parties, because there is a lot of fraud happening in fixed deposits and mutual funds, where third party people reach out and say that you are not able to travel, so I will help you do this. So beware of the player who's coming in between to help customer. So make awareness for the customer. And personally also, when somebody calls saying that I will help you here, yeah, there are agents, but check whether the right guys are you working with. And as much as possible today, volume is very less. You can cross check these people very easily, because the registered information available about these agents with the online providers. So the impersonators are the bigger fraud, who try to come and say that I'll help you get the mutual fund registered.
Thanks, sir. Another question. BPM industry has always been used to working in a very controlled environment. With the new day of working, where lot of controls would have been done away with, what fraud risk does this industry face?
What are they referring as BPM?
Huh?
So what industry are they referring?
BPM.
If they're referring to business process management, which is the back office, see, not much has changed, because instead of working from a back office center, now people are working from home. all risks which were existing there exist even now. Apart from that, data risk is additionally coming in over and above what they already have.
Saurabh is asking, sir, I applied Venice model to know financial statement manipulation, and I found that as per Venice model analysis, M score came to minus 2.22. On the basis of Venice M score, can further investigation can be done to check manipulation at financial statement level?
See, threshold is important. So it depends on the industry. And then you need to look at whether this threshold is within the acceptable norms or not. So you can't apply 1% across all types of companies. So I would suggest you look at the industry and what is the threshold average for that industry, and definitely you should look into it if threshold is not within the limits.
Another question: what strategy can internal audit deploy to identify and help management mitigate such risks, especially when the pricing models are FP TVP?
See, you need to keep a tab on realization, ultimately discounts, how pricing, ultimate pricing is important. Net pricing is important. You need to do the audit end to end to realize, to look at what is the net realization, and there should be pre-approval limits if it is falling below that, so that you can control what is the net realization on this.
Mr. Chanchal, how many more questions are there with you?
5 questions, sir.
5 questions. Yeah, you can complete them. We have 8 minutes. You can complete them. Thank you. Thank you.
Another question, sir. How effective will forensic auditing be in the current scenario of work from home?
So I have been 150% busy personally. So then that gives you an answer in terms of how much people are using us. So it's very, very effective. We have also changed our approach. So there will be some aspects you cannot perform, but majority of them can perform. So requests for investigations have gone up in the COVID times.
Sir, what are the top 3 fraud risks according to you in retail industry in this time?
One is stock siphoning, because the cycle count will not be happening, inventory count will not be happening. So what is the real stock? To find out, it will take a long time. So people may do a lot of fraud on the inventory. Second fraud is on the new stocks received vis-a-vis sold. They may inflate a lot of sales and keep circulating so that they can show that, because there will be some pressure. So for incentive. So second could be incentive. On collection, still there is a daily reconciliation which people do on banking, so the risk is limited. Inventory, the fresh entry records, and lastly on actual people coming in and claiming a salary, because there will be 5 people coming and they may claim as 10, and then people without coming may share. So biometric is not there. So employee cost will be another area where people may not come and still claim.
Next question. IA are required to consider fraud risk during planning audit assignment and identify mitigating controls. So to that extent, they are responsible to comment on the controls where the line between audit and investigation.
See, it is a gray area. That's why I said you should comment up to suspicion if you get in the normal course of audit plan for sure. But you are not expected to find suspicion in every audit procedure. If you are reasonably covering what you have to cover and question them, and you don't get a suspicion, you are good enough to defend yourself. But if you have not performed those procedures, because of that, then suspicion is missed out, people may question you, but you are not expected to find a suspicion in every process.
So, given that in a current situation, companies are landed up compromising on segregation of duties, what do you recommend in such situations? Also, any enhanced controls required for super user admin IDs?
Yeah, segregation of control are being dropped. Those places, people are building compensating controls before payment, so that at least before payment we are able to stop. And also at the time of receipt of material. So bill passing controls are getting enhanced. 2 levels reviews are being factored in, so that there can be some compensating controls be built in for the SODs which are being compromised.
Thank you, sir. We have covered all questions.
Thank you, Chanchal, for patiently telling all the questions. Appreciate your effort. Back to you, Mr. Vidyadharan. Before that, concluding comments. Relook at what you are doing as process. The new normal is yet to settle. It is not that I am a master of it. I am learning along with you. So it will evolve every 6 months. First of all, get up to speed to the current scenario and be open in updating that. Next 6 to 12 months, it will evolve before the new normal settles down. So be patient and keep updating yourself on this. And back to you, Mr. Vidyadharan.
Thank you, Mr. Arun Balaji. With his vast experience in the field of fraud, risk and investigation, etc., yes, his presentation has been very exhaustive, comprehensive and all pervasive. And he has handled all the questions in an excellent manner. I think the audience and those who have raised the questions specifically would have been very happy to get answers from an experienced guy like Mr. Arun Balaji. I profusely thank Arun Balaji on my behalf and on behalf of Madras Chapter IAA, and on behalf of all the audience participants. I thank Mr. Balaji, Arun Balaji. I thank Mr. Chanchal also for effective coordination. Thank you very much, Mr. Arun Balaji. Let us close the webinar now. Thank you very much. Thank you all the participants. Thank you. Bye. Good night.